So Sundos, you can bring them in. I know them from Harrisburg area. We organized together with the uh, Harrisburg Palestinian community and do some local actions. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Joy.
Absolutely. So you are Palestinian and we put on some great actions locally and we've been doing carpooling to DC and everything, which has been so phenomenal. And I'm like honored you guys even include me. It's been amazing. And one of the things I love about our group so much is it is Palestinian led. Do you want to talk about the importance of that when it comes to organizing and just maybe for a lot of the, because our movement is so big, maybe explain the importance of if there are Palestinians in your group, why they should be the ones taking the lead.
Yeah, of course. First of all, though, I don't believe that anyone should be thanking anyone for being included. I think that's what the standard should be. We're just not used to being
Right on.
inclusive as a society. So we need to work in all the ways possible to always include people. And if we're not, we need to be called in and called out if we are not including people. That's the bare minimum, in my opinion. And as
Good
somebody who
point.
doesn't drive and hasn't had a car ever in my life, I've been a transit rider most of my life and poor or low income. It's really, really important that I have access to also using my voice and being able to be heard and be seen in every space that everybody else gets to be in, just
Right.
as equally. In regards to specifically Palestinian voices, I mean, when you think about any movement for liberation, we have to think about who is harmed and who is the most marginalized in this movement. And in this specific movement, it is Palestinians. We have been silenced since before 1948. We have been basically pushed aside. The concept of progressive except for Palestine has been the case my entire life. I mean, people will understand queer liberation. And as a queer person myself, I've always kind of not really felt like that was the thing that I needed to fight so hard for. People just didn't really see that first thing. I wore hijab for 10 years of my life, and that was the first thing that people saw about me. And so
Sure.
my identity was defined by everyone around me. But when conversations about Palestine came up, it was always like, well, it's complicated. Well, it's this or well, it's that. And when you try to explain how horrific and truly depraved colonization really is, and the colonization of my people has been, it's really, really hard for people to understand that because of the lies and the gaslighting and the propaganda that we've been fed our entire lives. Growing up in America, I was born in Texas. I've been in America my entire life. I am so used to being in spaces where people have an opinion about Palestine that has no inclusion of Palestinian voices or experiences whatsoever, whether it's the curriculum or the teachers or the professors in college, whoever it is, their ideology is always around what they've been told or what they've seen, what they've been fed, and it never includes our voices. And so it's more important now than ever for our voices to be centered and to be heard, because we've been saying that this is ecocide. We've been saying this is genocide. We've been saying these things for generations, and we've been writing papers about it and books and so many things, but people haven't listened to us. Now that non-Palestinians are viewing the horror that has been occurring in Palestine, people are listening, people are hearing. But at the same time, certain celebrity voices are always uplifted over Palestinians that have been doing this work forever. So it's
Yeah.
really, really important that we bring in Palestinians and our experiences, our direct connections to what's going on over there, brings in a perspective that a lot of people won't realize if something is actually harmful to the Palestinian message or our needs or what we're actually fighting for. It's really easy to theorize or read 25 million books about something and have opinions about it. But if you've never talked to a Palestinian to actually hear what we need as a varied group of, actually, we have different ethnic groups within Palestine. We have different religions within Palestine. We have so many different histories. I mean, we were a part of a trade route and so many people came in and out. And before borders existed, Palestine has always existed as ancestral land, as land that we stewarded and protected and took care of. And so we are so connected to it in a way that most people, I feel like, in the world don't really understand because it's so new to so many people.
Right.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully
no,
to some degree.
Do you feel a connection to indigenous peoples as far as Native Americans?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, whenever I'm asked about the impacts in Palestine of apartheid, of colonization, I connect it directly to the indigenous populations in America, because in this country, we see it on a day-to-day basis. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and lived in Seattle for a really long time. And in those cities, centering indigenous people's voices was really, really important to the work that we did, whether it was student leadership or, you know, grassroots organizing, whatever it was. Those populations know what the land needs. They know what not the experiences, the impacts of colonization are long term, because this is a settler colony. We all are here and live with these privileges because of the genocide that occurred to Native American populations all across this empire, really, because this shouldn't be one country. There's no reason that this massive place is one country.
Yes. And do you find that that's part of the issue, is that we have these arbitrary borders, be it between countries or states or what have you, and you see like the ridiculous upset in Texas of what's going on with the illegals and all of this racism and everything over these imaginary lines.
Yes, I see these lines, these borders, these walls as things that were put into place specifically to profit and exploit people. Nothing more, nothing less, because we've been able to take care of the land and be sustainable and be happy and healthy communities long before borders existed. And honestly, as a young kid, I actually lived in Jordan for a few years of my life, and we moved to the US permanently 3 months before 9/11. And so I had a really hard time making friends. But the people that I became friends with like this were undocumented immigrants in my school who were quiet, who kept their heads down, who didn't want to make a fuss to anyone. And I was quiet because I was a little Muslim girl who wasn't going to be seen anyways. Nobody wanted to talk to me. I was a terrorist. So I didn't really have the opportunity to just kind of come into society and make friends like anybody else. I already had a label on me. So those specific Mexican students really, I mean, we have a lot of shared culture, a lot of shared values, whether it's family or collective values. They really are the reason that I learned to make more friends. So I have had really, really strong feelings about this country's immigration system from a very young age because of those experiences. The fact that you have different rights because of the way that you got here, the way that you were, whether or not you were born here or not, is ridiculous. We should all have access to free movement, which Palestinians also don't, just like undocumented immigrants don't here, and indigenous populations forced into reservations and lack of resources, lack of education, so on and so forth. I mean, everything is compounded. And so undocumented immigrants, I mean, my heart and soul, when I was fresh out of college, one of the things that I really, really loved doing was working for an undocumented immigrant organization called GAZA in Oregon. And that was an incredible time for me. Like, Spanish and Arabic actually have a lot in common. We have a lot of shared language. Honestly, though, because of Muslim colonization of Spain for about 600 years. So that was not cool. and
Right.
Spanish colonization coming into South and Central America. But in today's age, we found a lot of commonality because of the experiences our people went through. Because America arbitrarily decided that this is their land and it's no longer part of Mexico. These borders exist now, and the resources that we have, you're not allowed to have them. You don't have access to them because you were born over here and not over here. None of us get to choose that. We are born where we're born. What makes any of us different than the next person who looks a little bit different or doesn't?
Right. And I think that's a lot of times I think people miss that, including, especially white people. And I'm speaking for, as a white person, I think a lot of people forget to look at that, at the fact that this is, this is something that so many people have dealt with, not just Palestinians, but also you look at this and you see, okay, they're fighting over the border in places like Texas. Well, what about in Palestine, where there isn't even technically a wall in a lot of the places, but they'll be imprisoned for just crossing the street or something like that. And if they were lucky enough to be born 2 miles, in front, they would have been totally cool. They would have had school, they would have had healthcare, everything like that. But because they happen to be there, that, like you said, you can't help where you're born, but you know, that is where their distinction lies, on that arbitrary border.
Right. If my grandparents didn't leave Palestine and they stayed in the village that I was told we were from, that village, the water is completely controlled by Israel. The land is mostly taken by Israeli settlers at this point in time. People don't have access to their own fruits or vegetables or produce. And then if they do want to go to a grocery store, how many checkpoints do you have to safely pass? I mean, I remember when I was, 12 years old, finding out one of my mom's friends, her nephew, was just walking his younger brother to school, and he just had to pass through one checkpoint. And it takes 3 hours to pass through this one checkpoint. Otherwise, it would be like a 20-minute walking trip, like 20 minutes. But, anyways, that's besides the point. On his way to school to drop off his little brother, he got a rubber bullet shot to the head and he lost his eye, and he's been in prison ever since. And that was just that he was just standing at the checkpoint. You don't really, I mean, the fact that we can walk around and just grab produce at a grocery store, we can go to school safely, we can do any of these things like they're nothing. But in a colonized place, in a place that is militarily occupied, where there are no rules or regulations for the occupier, there are only rules and regulation for the occupied, anything goes. Now, if he did something aggressive in any shape or form, even looked at them wrong, even spit on the ground in front of them, I mean, that's a charge right there.
Right.
But arbitrarily, they can get away with these things. I mean, I was just reading about in Nablus, multiple Palestinians are having their water tanks. This is water that they set aside because Israel controls their water and they only have so much that they have access to. They set aside tanks on the side so that they can have water later when they don't have access to water from Israel, when Israel doesn't feel like giving them water. And not only were those tanks completely spilled and stolen, but in addition to that, the water, the river that they use to try to fill up, that is far away from their homes, is constantly surrounded by settlers who throw rocks, who harass them, who are protected by not only Israeli police, but Israeli occupation forces.
Right.
So
And I
there's no
think,
recourse for any of those bad actions.
right. And I think that's one of the most mind-blowing things. I mean, I've spoken out about Palestine for a few years, and but not to this magnitude. I don't think I even understood just how bad it was, even reading about it and, talking about it and stuff. I don't think there's been so much that has come out about what has happened in the past that really has woken so many of us up. And I think, that's something that we all have to do, is really learn about what happened before all of this crap started on October 7th. we're seeing today that 4 more hostages died, but nobody's talking about the over 7,000 people imprisoned who are Palestinian, who most of which who don't even have charges, who are children, who have faced horrible abuse. Um, and everyone seems to ignore that. So, what is your response as a Palestinian when you see, especially online, but you see these this gaslighting and this disgusting attempt at rationalization of no, it's not racist. This has nothing to do with race. Not at all. Like when you see people trying to, mental twister, just like this isn't what you think it is. How do you react?
Ooh, I mean, growing up, it was a lot easier, I would say, than it is right now. Even then, it's always been really a sore spot that is very triggering for me because growing up, we always watched Al Jazeera. That's the Arabic news channel that my parents always had on at home. So I've seen Palestinian kids shot and kidnapped and beat up by these massive men in full military gear and big old assault rifles and things like that. So many times in my life, I've seen Palestinian kids strapped to tanks. I've witnessed more horror than I need to or anyone needs to. But even then, I think because I was just so used to not being heard, that I would try my best to explain and try to make it about peace. But at this point in my life, there have been too many images of mutilated children for me to have any patience for that. I find it so incredibly triggering because it just brings out so many images that have been held in my brain for so long, but especially these last couple of weeks. The things that they're doing to children in the West Bank, the things that they're doing to children in Gaza, the burning flesh, things like that. It's just, it feels impossible to have those conversations. And I'm not saying this is what other people should do. I'm just saying, as coming from a place of a lot of trauma and really struggling, I don't have those conversations anymore. If you don't see Palestinians as human beings, right, especially when it comes, for me, it's children always. I will protect a child no matter what it takes. The only times that I've ever considered hurting other people as an adult was when they hurt a child or when they got too close to my nephew, to be honest with you. So that's the hardest part for me. I would urge non-Palestinians to stand with us and to provide factual evidence, to talk about the differences in deaths, even though we're not numbers, but these numbers do make a difference to people who don't care about us as human beings. The fact that within the first 12 days after October 7th, more children had been killed in Gaza than all Israelis in any year, in all of the years before that. Not any year, but all of the years before that. More children in Gaza were killed in 12 days than any Israelis ever killed in the history of Israel. That alone should be shocking people to do something to care. But if you don't see Palestinians as human beings, if you are racist and don't want to admit it, then that's just who you are, and you're not going to stand with humanity.
Right. And I think that it's proven in the simple fact that every single time you see something egregious happening to a Palestinian, you immediately think, oh my God, if this was an Israeli kid, like, oh my God, everyone would be in the street. No one would have an issue with us in the street anymore. Everyone with their pussy hats who was out there and everything like that. Everyone, this selective outrage is so disgusting. And we see all of these IDF videos of them mocking, trashing mutual aid, smashing toys, just doing the most egregious stuff, trying on women's lingerie and making fun of it, dancing, having a rave on their bones, like doing all these things on camera with hubris. And we're supposed to just not, like, that's okay because October 7th.
Right. Which also October 7th, by the way, a good few hundred of those deaths were actually IOF.
Yep,
And
sure were.
multiple hostages have admitted that.
Yep,
So that number that keeps getting thrown out there was IOF soldiers. There was not a single decapitated baby. There was not a
nope.
single baby put in an oven, but there have been Palestinian babies put in ovens since
Yeah,
48.
yeah.
There is evidence, there are stories, there are statistics, there are investigative uh, reports of these exact crimes, the rapes, the torture, the abuse, drugging people. That has happened throughout the last 8 months, but has also happened since before 1948, since the original militias that made up the IOF started massacring Palestinian villages left and right.
It's, I think we learned so quickly that when somebody says something, it can be proven false a million times. I mean, even the White House walked back that decapitated baby thing. I mean, Biden said he saw pictures. He said he saw pictures. And I was just rereading the article again last night, and it says, I saw pictures, and then White House walked it back. Oh, he says he didn't see pictures. He read it in an article. Okay, well, that's one of the places that has debunked it. But yet, the spokesperson for the White House just said 4 days ago there's been decapitated babies. So it doesn't matter if people walk it back. People still want to use that so bad to try to rationalize, what's going on. The numbers we're getting now are 42,000 martyrs. Do you think that's accurate, or do you think it's more?
Palestinians on the ground have been saying it's hundreds of thousands for the last several months, actually. But when you don't have registries, you don't have archives, you don't have hospitals, you don't have a way to check DNA, and you have all of these bodies that have deteriorated into skeletons. You have mass graves. You have people who have been kidnapped and all their clothes changed out, and their organs, their skin has been stolen, literally, because Israel has the biggest skin bank in the world because of Palestinians. And they've admitted to that, by the way. I've watched many videos of Israeli folks talking about it. How do I identify a body? And they're counting bodies that are identified specifically. So if you are a baby, if you are an elderly person with no one else, if you are any human being whose entire family was lost and there's nobody there to identify you, to know where you come from or who you are, you're not included in that 42,000. Whatever
Right.
that number is, it's when we have the time to go in and start really uncovering the depths of this monstrosity, we are going to discover things. I mean, I don't know how we can discover something more inhumane, more depraved than what we've been seeing over the last 8 months, but it is going to just get worse, because even as much as we've seen Palestinians who live there have told us time and time again, we are only getting a snapshot, a small little snapshot of what is really going on over there. So I can't even imagine how many people are unnamed. Nobody knows that they're gone, that they're missing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a good point. Do you have relatives you're close to in Gaza?
I do not know. My sister-in-law is from Gaza, so my brother's wife. And since the beginning of this uptick in ethnic cleansing and genocide, because it's been genocide since the 90s, 1820, whenever they decided, they were like, let's colonize Palestine, and started literally having meetings with different government officials. It's been genocide since then. But this recent uptick, I mean, she has had a really hard time connecting with her family. And especially because WhatsApp has been one of those platforms that people of color, especially immigrants, use to be able to connect to their families across borders regularly, because it is a free platform that is very useful, that you can connect to anyone in the world from anywhere in the world. it's really, really hard to continue using that platform because we know that Meta has been using locations of people to target Palestinians. I mean, they are sharing that information very comfortably with Israeli Defense Forces.
Right.
Defense.
Right. Well, it's like we have a defense budget. It's so disgusting. One thing I did also want to ask you about is, TikTok. It was caught on audio by the so-called Human Rights Campaign and the ADL, who are just egregious. That they want to take down TikTok specifically because it is the platform of, like, God, like 85% is all of us talking about free Palestine, and that they want it taken down because of that until after the election. So we've seen with, even going on TikTok, we have to say things like unalived and, like I word and, things like this, because otherwise our videos are taken down, or, they have to go for review. So what are your thoughts as far as the censorship has gone, and not just online, but even people who one of the UK government officials just got suspended because she liked a comment on Twitter that was a little like sarcastic spoof video that what's his name, Jon Stewart did years ago. She liked it, and then all of a sudden, so people are also losing their jobs just because we supposedly have this freedom of speech that is very evidently not existent.
I would say I'm not shocked, to be honest. When people started losing their jobs and really things started ramping up in that way, where Americans were actually having to risk something for this, I wasn't surprised, because growing up in this country, I've been in so many spaces where I was the only voice that advocated for Palestine, and people weren't happy about it, for one. But when I would post things around school, in places where students are allowed to put up flyers, they would always be taken down in a couple hours. They would just disappear. Nobody would tell me why. I wasn't able to talk about Palestine in specific spaces. It'd be like, oh, actually, no, we can't accommodate another person. But was it really that you couldn't accommodate another person, or was it the topic that I wanted to discuss?
Right.
And this is just, it's so much clearer now because it's happening on such a mass scale. But for example, one of our community members, she tried to participate in a cultural day at the Capitol here in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, and was recently sent an email that they don't have room for this and this table. And they said Palestine and then specifically another country. And so she was just like, actually, well, we can share tables. That's totally fine. If there's not room for another table, that's okay. We can share tables. And they responded saying, no, that's too many Arabs for this cultural festival. And then she responded, rightfully so, explaining the racism of the situation. And they canceled the event. I mean, to me, that's just another example. But also, I mean, earlier today, we had an email come from an art project that we've been working on. All of a sudden, they want us to remove Free Palestine from this art project, the words Free Palestine, within 2 days. Otherwise, we can't be at the reception for this art project. It's a community art project, and I don't want to go into too many details about specifically which art project it is, because other people are involved in working on it. But the fact is, we applied to this art project clearly talking about centering Palestinian writers for the liberation of Palestine, and it was approved. But the second that the words Free Palestine, and it was written only in one place, there's Palestine flags, there's all sorts of symbols, there's actually Free Palestine written in Arabic, not that whoever complained knows how to read Arabic. But suddenly they want us to take that down immediately. Otherwise, we can't be a part of this project.
Oh my gosh.
It's everywhere. But to me, it's especially angering right now because, like I said, I have these images of mutilated children for 8 months now.
Yeah.
And you're asking us to be silent. You are trying to suppress the voices of Palestinians. This is a Palestinian art project that is supposed to be about liberation in the
Right.
middle of a mass ethnic cleansing campaign. But this is the norm. I mean, when money and resource extraction is your main goal throughout every system of power, through every institution, and you can buy people everywhere you are, that's the norm. And this is the country we live in. It was founded on genocide, and it was built up with institutions that continue to uplift white supremacy and further genocides. I mean, we can look at Congo, we can look at Sudan, we can look at so many other countries throughout the last 100 years. We can look at Iraq and Afghanistan and so many others. We as Americans are so responsible for so much of the horror that is going on in the world because we don't speak up, honestly.
Absolutely. If you could leave someone, and this is like, I always ask people this, and they're like, oh, that's so difficult. But if you could leave, our viewers with something as a Palestinian to take away from this, something you want them to think about, something you want them to do, what would you share with them?
Oh, gosh. I think education is the number one thing in the world for anything, to be honest. I would ask every single viewer and every person who feels like humanity matters to them in some shape or form, to learn about how the systems that we live in, the norms that we exist within, how they were created and how interconnected they are. Whether it's people having to buy produce that is mass produced and picked and harvested by people at below human conditions and wages and treatment, or it's the institutions that we go to for education, how most of those chairs and tables that we sit at are literally built by people in prison making $2 an hour, prisons that are owned by companies, or how our Congress and how our government is bought by corporations and not by our actual votes. Every single piece of the puzzle of our daily lives, whether it's the things that we buy, the things that we view, everything is interconnected through imperialism, through capitalism, through white supremacist means. So I would ask everyone to read, what does imperialism mean in this country? How has it impacted South America? How has it impacted indigenous populations where you live right now? How is it impacting policing? I'm sorry, this is a really big thing to kind of ask from people.
You are so right.
But I think education is where it's at. If you understand where things intersect and connect, you can understand the oppression that people live within. Why are people so poor that if they're working full-time jobs, 2 or 3 side hustles, they're still not able to pay rent, buy groceries, and take care of their health? Why are people not able to, if they have walking devices, they can't enjoy good weather because all of the infrastructure is garbage, but we're sending money over for war after war after war in so many other countries. Like it is all one horrible piece, but as long as we are ignoring it and going and focusing only on me, myself, and I, and what can I do to survive today, the harm is going to continue and the oppression is only going to get worse. So I feel like it's a moral responsibility to understand what we participate in and what we can do to change it.
That is, you give me goosebumps. You are so, so, so right. I am so thankful for you to join tonight, Sundos. I hope I see you Friday or Saturday or our next event. Can you, do you want to give like your, do you know our Instagram offhand?
Yeah, it's at HBG Palestine Coalition.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Much love, and your perspective was so needed. We're so appreciative. So
Thank you so
thank
much for having
you.
me, Joy. Take care,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Bye-bye.